and see, I guess, how much do you remember of these class contents too. So for today, we're supposed to be looking at the second and third lectures in the lecture files there. So, the first one here, lecture number 2, the accidental continent, as I called it. So I'm looking now at slide 3. And it was just an opening question to ask students about risk and reward. Have you ever taken a big chance or risk before, and what happened? So, of course, I'm sure everybody's taken some kind of risk in their life. And certainly you are thinking of a big risk to come, right? Going to Texas to study.
Yeah.
So it's a big risk. There's a risk of failure, right? Of it not working out. But there's also a risk that there could be a big reward. Whether you stay there, or even as you said, you go there and then you come back, there's still the reward of experience,
yes,
of having gone there. So in this lecture, I talk about how European countries took big risks in order to gain rewards of various kinds. All right, next slide, slide 4. Several questions for the presentation. How and why did Europeans come to America? What would they do about the New World that was discovered? How was Columbus's discovery of the New World different? And how was profit a motivating factor, or a very important thing? All right, slide 5. Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. And so here I just wanted to, the thing about history, you can always kind of keep going back, right? The cause of this, the cause of this, the cause of this, the cause of this. And so when we're thinking about the New World, the Americas, why was it found by Europe, or why did they go there? Well, to know that, it's kind of important to know a little bit about what Europe was longer ago, okay? And longer ago, as it says here, around 476 to 1000 CE, like now we're in 2000s, right? So 1,000 years ago or more. Europe was weak and divided. It was controlled by 2 empires, the Byzantine Empire in the east, that red area, and the Roman Empire, that's the orange area in the center here, kind of still Italy and whatnot. But that empire is falling apart. Okay, it's coming on hard times. And next slide. This is also the time when Islam, the Muslim religion, began and becomes an important power in the world. And this map shows the spread of Islam as a religion, but also as a political power in the Middle East. So Islam gets its start in that orange area, and then it starts to move further west and east into those light orange places, and even down into that red area in the Saudi Arabian section. And this is a problem for the Roman and Byzantine empires, these Christian empires, because of course at this time religion is very important, and that is a way that countries can have political power through their churches and their religious places. So if Islam is spreading, that means that the Christian areas, they are losing territory. They're losing political power. So this is a time when Islam and Christianity start to have competition with each other. All right, next slide. And so the churches decided to start what were called the Crusades. The Crusades were religious wars. The Christians decided they need to go down into the Muslim areas and take back their lands, because Muslims were starting to take over Christian places. So the Christian Pope, the leaders, decided we are going to have a religious war against the Muslims. would take back their lands. And of course they did this for political power, but also economic reasons, right? Especially in this time, but even today. How do churches and religious places keep running, right? They need money,
Yes.
and usually their followers give money to the church, right? Even I've seen it here at the Buddhist temple. If you've ever been to the temple here, you see the old people giving money to the temple,
Yes.
right? So, if in this time, if the church is losing land,
Yes.
losing territory, that means they don't have churches there anymore,
Yes.
and they're going to lose money,
Yes.
right? So this hurts them in politics, but also economics, right? So less land, less churches, less money. So they have a motivation to go and attack the Muslims because they want to get their land back and have churches again in those places. Okay. So I've talked about this in the past, but economics, very important, right? For everything when you think about history as well. Money. All right, the next slide here. This is just some images, some paintings that were done during the Crusades of hundreds and thousands of men dying in these wars. And of course, they were very bloody, terrible battles because at that time technology is very poor, right? Very low technology. Even they don't have guns at this time, so they're using big swords and axes and slicing at each other. So the way people died was very bad. And next slide. Although there were many bad points, there were still good points as well of the Crusades. The main good thing was that Europeans learned a lot from the Crusades. They learned about how to run an exploration. If you're going to go explore someplace, you need to gather a team, right? A group of people. And for the Europeans, when they went on these crusades, they had hundreds or thousands of people moving together, right? So you would need ships, you would need animals, you would need, of course, leaders and captains and so on. You would need to organize your food, weapons, right? So that would be very important if you want to start exploring the world, right? How to move and organize a big travel. They also improved their business, international trade. And there was also several new ideas that they gained from the Middle East. In my images there, one of those you can see mathematics. They learned about algebra and other kinds of mathematics from the Arab peoples. So actually, the algebra that we use today, it comes from the Arabs originally. They pioneered that mathematics. So all of these things, of course, would be very helpful for the Europeans for exploration when they decide to start sailing around the world. Next slide. This slide says the Orient. So during the Crusades, the Europeans heard many stories from the Muslim peoples, and they heard about this place called the Orient. This was the name for India, China, Korea, Asia in general. Okay? And they heard from the Muslims that in the Orient it was this kind of fantastic place. And you could get very rich. There was lots of gold to be found in the Orient. And so for the Europeans, they thought, well, if it's very rich, if there's lots of gold and products that we can use there, we've got to go. We've got to get to India, to China. And so the Europeans, after the Crusades, they begin to try to find ways, how can they go to the East, the Orient. Next slide. One of the first explorations was started, led by a man named Marco Polo, a very famous Italian explorer. And in 1271, he and other explorers took a land route to China. So you can see here this map, this red line that is going across the land, that is the land route they took to China. And I'm not sure what it's called in Korean, but there's this thing we call the Silk Road.
Yes.
That's the Silk Road. Marco Polo was one of the pioneers of this Silk Road. Okay, so they could send goods back and forth between Europe, Italy, and Asia in China. Okay.
He walk around the...
Yes, they took horses and other animals in a big group and went across the land. And then later, they sailed around below with boats back to Italy. Okay. But yeah, that's a map of the route that they took. They took the land route first. All right, and next slide here, Mediterranean states. This land route, this trade, would be very important in Europe because it helped these European countries, especially in Italy, to get richer. So we know these famous cities today in Italy. Venice, we call Florence, but Firenze. These famous cities, they became famous because of this trade with China. Okay, they became rich places. So if you go there today, I have some pictures there, pictures and paintings of what they look like even today. They look beautiful and interesting because of all of this money that came from Chinese wealth, from spices and goods that they were selling, right? All the spices and goods came from China to Italy, and then they would sell that stuff to the rest of Europe. Okay? So Italy had a monopoly at this time on Chinese products. Okay, I'm sorry, I shouldn't just say China, but Oriental products. Products from India, China, even Korea. Okay? So, I don't know. When I see this, I think it's kind of interesting, kind of humorous. When we go to Italy, right, we live in Asia. We go to Italy and we think, wow, it's so beautiful, these places, right? But they were built with Asian money, with Asian products, right? They were selling Asian stuff to build these beautiful places. Alright, so Italy is like a monopoly at this time. They're selling all the goods and stuff to other European countries. Next slide. However, this wealth was limited only to Italy and a few other places, right? The Italians discovered this route, and so they protected it, right? They made sure only these Italian cities and countries could use this route, this way to the Orient. Other countries couldn't use it, okay? If they tried, the Italians were very powerful, they had armies, they would attack them. Okay? So again, Italy has a monopoly here at this time. So other Western Europeans like Portugal and the Netherlands, they were also rich countries. They were jealous of this power, this money the Italians had. And so they tried to find other ways to go to the Orient. Next slide. Western European expeditions. So the solution for these other European countries was to find another way to go to the Orient, to Asia. This began with the Portuguese, and this is the map you can see on this slide here. Starting from Portugal, they thought they could sail around Africa to get to Asia. And in 1488, they tried it. They sailed around the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa and all the way around to India. And so Italy, as we heard before, Italy had the land route.
Yes.
Now, Portugal has the ocean route south around Africa.
Yes.
So just like Italy had their armies to protect their way. Now the Portuguese will have their armies to protect their way south to India and China. And of course this was very profitable for them as well. Like the Italians, they made huge amounts of money from this trade. So now it's not just Italy, it's not a monopoly, it's what we call a duopoly. Duopoly, because there's two countries now, Italy and Portugal, that have two trade routes going to China. Okay?
네. Portuguese, they can trade with other country.
Right.
This side is very
Well, so they would...
far to Orient.
Yes. Well, both were far, right?
Yeah.
If they went by land,
Yes.
right? Today we could drive a car, right? Or even there might be a train route. But at that time it's just horses and walking,
Yes.
right? So it takes a long time. The ocean way, it was very long.
Yes.
And I don't know the distance and timing,
Yes.
okay? But usually traveling by boat is much faster than by horse or by foot,
Yeah.
right? Boats, you have wind power, right? So the distance might actually be further going around Africa,
Yes.
but maybe the timing is similar. I don't know, because the ocean, the wind power is much faster, okay, than walking. All right. So in any case, both routes were good,
Yes.
the land route or the ocean, but only two countries can use them. Okay, they would protect them with their armies. So next slide. Again, Western European expeditions, but now the Spanish. Another Western country, the Spanish, were late to this game of finding trade routes. Right? Already the Italians, the Portuguese, and some others had their routes.
Yes.
But since they are late, they are willing to take some risks to try and get profit.
Yeah.
And so they supported a crazy plan from Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, his plan was to sail straight across the Atlantic Ocean to get to China. Right? So his plan was to sail from Spain around
Yeah.
to Asia on the other side. And the map that you see on this page here, this was the map that Columbus used to convince the King and Queen of Spain that this would not be a big problem. Right? Using this map and his calculations, he said it wouldn't be very far to get to Asia. So, hearing about that and looking at this map, it sounds like maybe, not a big problem, right? But next slide. Why was this a risk? Well, first of all, it had never been done before, right? Nobody had sailed kind of forever in that direction, okay? And at the time, nobody knew how long will it take? How far is the distance? Okay, you might sail for months, maybe years. We don't know how far it is, okay? So that's a big risk, right? How much food do you take with you on this trip, right? And certainly if you imagine going on a trip, right? Usually for us, I think it's hard for us to imagine. We take a trip, we take a plane. Like longest trip we could take is maybe, I don't know, going to the States or even Europe. It might take 8 to 15 hours, the flight, right?
Yeah.
But if you're on a boat for days and months,
Yeah.
you can get very bored. You can even kind of go crazy,
Yeah.
right? So this was a dangerous trip. However, as I also say in the same slide, they were encouraged by other discoveries. The Canary Islands, the Azores, those were islands, as you can see from the map here,